Why technical excellence is not enough, and why the most dangerous stakeholders are the ones nobody put on the register. In 2016, a major technology company completed an 18-month project to automate a significant portion of its customer service operations. The system worked. The code was clean. The testing was thorough. The go-live was on time and under budget. Within 3 months, the project had been partially reversed at enormous cost. The project manager had been reassigned, and the organization's relationship with its frontline workforce, the customer service agents whose roles had been automated, had deteriorated in a way that affected retention, morale, and client satisfaction for the better part of a year. The technical team had delivered exactly what they were asked to deliver. But nobody had meaningfully engaged the people whose jobs the project would change. Nobody had mapped the impact on the teams whose workflows would be disrupted. Nobody had worked with union representatives or with middle managers whose departments would shrink, or with the clients whose service experience would change. The stakeholder register existed. It listed the sponsor, the IT director, the finance team, and the project steering committee. It did not include the people who actually experienced the consequences of the project every single day. This is the most common and the most costly stakeholder management failure. Not the absence of a stakeholder register, but the presence of a register that only maps the powerful and ignores everyone else. Stakeholder management done well is one of the most powerful skills in project management. Done poorly or not done at all, it is one of the most reliable ways to destroy a project that was technically successful. Welcome back to The Catalyst. This is episode 13. Today we cover stakeholder management from the ground up. Who stakeholders really are, how to identify the ones most project managers miss, how to analyze their positions, and how to build an engagement approach that turns potential resistance into genuine support. The intellectual foundation of stakeholder management comes from Edward Freeman, a professor at the Darden School of Business at the University of Virginia, whose 1984 book Strategic Management, A Stakeholder Approach, fundamentally changed how organizations think about success. Freeman's argument was directed against the dominant view of the time, the shareholder theory, associated with Milton Friedman, which held that the sole purpose of a corporation was to generate returns for its shareholders. Everything else was noise. Freeman countered that this view was both ethically incomplete and strategically dangerous. He argued that organizations exist within ecosystems of interdependent relationships with employees, customers, suppliers, communities, regulators, and many others, and that ignoring any of these relationships eventually produces consequences that destroy shareholder value. You cannot please shareholders over the long term by treating everyone else as irrelevant. The Project Management Institute formalized stakeholder management as a distinct knowledge area in the PMBOK guide, defining a stakeholder as anyone who may affect, be affected by, or perceive themselves to be affected by a project. That last phrase, perceive themselves to be affected, is critical. Perception drives behavior. A stakeholder who feels overlooked will resist your project, even if the project is objectively good for them. The first and most important step in stakeholder management is identification. And the most common mistake is stopping too early. Most project teams identify the obvious stakeholders without difficulty. The sponsor who is funding the project, the steering committee that governs it, the core project team delivering it, the primary client or business owner receiving it. These are the central ring. They matter enormously, and they are usually well managed. The dangerous stakeholders are in the outer rings. The teams adjacent to the project who will be affected by its outputs but are not in the room. The end users who will have to change their daily working practices. The middle managers whose span of control will shift. The communities outside the organization who interact with the process. The project is changing. The regulators who will eventually govern the output. In large infrastructure projects in India, whether it is a new metro line in Bengaluru, a highway expansion, or a data center build, stakeholder failures almost always originate in the same place. The project team manages its government approvals and its internal team, but underinvests in community engagement, local business impact, or environmental group relationships. By the time these stakeholders mobilize, the project is halfway through construction, and the reversal costs are enormous. A practical approach to comprehensive stakeholder identification is the concentric circles method. Draw 4 rings. The innermost ring is your direct project team. The second ring is your governance and funding stakeholders. The third ring is anyone who receives or is affected by the project outputs. Operational teams, end users, client departments. The fourth ring is the wider context. Regulators, communities, media, unions, adjacent projects. Work through every ring deliberately before you close your register. Ask one more question that most teams skip. Who is not in this room who will be affected by our decisions? The absent voice is often the loudest when the project lands. Once you have identified your stakeholders, you need to analyze their positions, their power to influence the project, their interest in its outcomes, and their current attitude toward it. The most widely used tool for this analysis is the Power Interest Matrix, developed by Aubrey Mendelow. It divides stakeholders into 4 quadrants based on 2 dimensions: how much power they have to influence the project and how much interest they have in its outcomes. High power, high interest stakeholders are your key players. They need close management, regular engagement, and genuine involvement in major decisions. Keeping these stakeholders informed and influential is not just good practice. It is a risk management imperative. High power, low interest stakeholders need to be kept satisfied. They may not be deeply engaged in the project day to day, but they hold the authority to accelerate or block it. A senior executive sponsor who is not a hands-on participant but can pull funding at a board meeting belongs in this quadrant. Low power, high interest stakeholders need to be kept informed. End users often sit here. They care deeply about the project because it will change their daily working lives. But they have limited authority to influence its direction. Neglecting this group is a classic mistake. They may have low formal power, but they have enormous informal influence over adoption and implementation success. Low power, low interest stakeholders require minimal management effort. Monitor them and communicate broadly, but do not invest your most scarce resource, time, in this quadrant at the expense of the others. Critically, stakeholder positions are not fixed. A low-interest stakeholder can become high-interest the moment they hear a rumor about what the project will do to their team. A satisfied stakeholder can become resistant if a key decision is made without them. Your stakeholder analysis needs to be a living document, revisited at every major project phase. Stakeholder analysis tells you who your stakeholders are and where they sit. Stakeholder engagement is what you actually do about it. The foundation of effective stakeholder engagement is understanding that different stakeholders need different things. Some need information, regular, clear updates that give them visibility without demanding active participation. Some need influence, genuine input into decisions that affect them. Some need validation, the feeling that their concerns have been heard, even when the project cannot accommodate every request. The most valuable stakeholder engagement activity is rarely a formal presentation. It is a one-to-one conversation early in the project, before positions have hardened. The questions that generate the most useful intelligence are not about the project. They are about the stakeholder. What matters most to you in how this project lands? What would a successful outcome look like from your perspective? What concerns you most about what you have heard so far? These conversations accomplish two things simultaneously. They surface information you would not otherwise have: concerns, constraints, political sensitivities, informal alliances. And they create a relationship of respect that makes future engagement vastly easier. In Wipro's large-scale enterprise transformation programs, stakeholder engagement plans are treated as a distinct deliverable, not a section of the project plan, but a standalone document with named stakeholders, engagement objectives, scheduled touchpoints, and escalation triggers. That level of deliberateness reflects hard-won experience. The projects that go off the rails almost always have a stakeholder story somewhere in their history. 5 things to carry from this episode. 1. Technical success does not guarantee project success. Projects are delivered through people and into organizations. If the people and organizations affected by your project are not engaged, the best technical delivery in the world can still produce a failed outcome. 2. The most dangerous stakeholders are the ones not on your register. Identify broadly. Use the concentric circles method. Ask who is absent. The voice you do not hear in planning is often the one that stops your implementation. 3. Power and interest are not the only dimensions that matter. Attitude matters too. A high-power, high-interest stakeholder who is resistant to your project is a fundamentally different management challenge than one who is supportive. Your engagement strategy needs to distinguish between the two. 4. Stakeholder analysis is not a one-time exercise. Positions shift. Context changes. A stakeholder who was neutral at kickoff may be actively opposed by mid-project, often because something happened that they were not consulted on. Build regular review cycles into your stakeholder process. 5. Your action. Take your current project stakeholder register and ask whether it includes anyone in the outer rings: end users, adjacent teams, communities, regulators. If the register only contains sponsors and steering committee members, it is not a stakeholder register. It is a governance list. Close the gap before someone outside that list closes it for you. Coming up on episode 14 of The Catalyst, we go deeper into how you actually communicate across all of those stakeholders. Communication management, the framework for deciding who gets what information, in what format, at what frequency, and through which channel. Why the most common communication failures in projects are structural, not personal. And how a deliberate communication management plan changes the entire project dynamic. Stay tuned.